Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something very interesting. We're going to be going through a tier list of 35 selected relevant PvP centered tunes, and I'm going to be ranking them on a tier list, three separate tier lists for Otherworld Battle, AC, and Timeline Battle. And I'm going to briefly go over their strengths. We're going to start in alphabetical order with Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is still a very useful and one of the top PvP characters in the game. He has very good stats like Super Guard Break on his second skill counter, decreased damage received, making him one of the tankiest characters, especially with something like a Brilliant Conquest. Cancelable iframes that do very good burst damage. He has debuff removal on his second skill as well. That's very low cooldown. He has a revive and heal. He has a damage proc on fourth skill. He's proc friendly, and he has penetration. So he has critical PvP stats that make him very useful, even being an old character who's not really picked in Timeline Battle, for example, but I would still categorize him easily as S tier in Timeline Battle still, even though he's on the lower end of S tier. He is almost unkillable combined with debuff removal and Brilliant Conquest, or he could do really good one-shot burst damage potential with something like a Brilliant Greed or a Brilliant Energy. Arguably doesn't need debuff removal, which is why in Otherworld Battle he's categorized in the very high A tier. He's very useful there, survives for a long period of time with Brilliant Conquest, and with Brilliant Greed or Energy, he could even be used as a debuff character and still potentially one-shot opposition. So he's still a very good choice for Otherworld Battle. And for AC, he's also in the very high A tier. He does have some speeds that can counter him, but he's still a very good matchup against Knulls. He prioritizes his best skills right away. So he's still very useful in PvP. Alright, the next character we're going to be talking about is Agent Venom, who's very weird in the placement list because he's mostly utilized for his support, but he does have some good abilities about him. He's got increase and decrease chain hit. He's got decrease and increase damage received that he gives to the whole team if they're symbiotes. He's pretty much the best support in the game for the best PvP character in the game. You know who. He's got a lot of heal. He has some cancelable skills that have decent debuffs, and he's got penetration. So he's got some decent abilities, but unfortunately he has no revive. So when he has no revive, he's basically kind of like a C tier character, more or less. His support is undeniable. So in places like Timeline Battle, he's easily in A tier. Like he can't be ranked S tier, but he could definitely be ranked A tier as one of the best supports in the game. And he's mostly built with Brilliant Liberation. You can use Brilliant Insight. And if you want to get the best out of the character, you maybe want to build him for DPS, maybe something like a Brilliant Greed. Definitely an A tier, usable 6 skill as well. I think that's a fair placement in Timeline Battle. In Otherworld Battle, I would say he's more around high B tier. I don't think he's 100% necessary there. I think that there's a lot of teams that you could diversify with, mostly with a lot of different meta, like 4 meta with debuff removal support or whatnot. He's not typically required, but he's still one of the best supports and ranks in this B tier more or less. In AC, to build the best team in the game, he's definitely within A tier. Best support for Knull to go into the fifth region and create a team that is very, very difficult to kill, thus him ranking in this placement. All right, next on this list, we've got Apocalypse. And I think Apocalypse is actually pretty underrated. I think he's very usable in all PvP. He's pretty CTP versatile. He's got super guard break. He's got decreased damage received. He gives self debuff removal and to all mutant allies, which makes him very good in auto placements with a large team selection. Heal and revive. He has cancelable skills. He's a debuff master. He constantly debuffs. He has penetration. So he has a lot of really good stats, but his skills can be a little bit clunky and slow. So he could be a little bit tricky to use on manual, but when you know how to use him, he could easily be ranked in timeline battle as a mid B tier character. He's definitely more useful than others. He has some CTB versatility. He could be used with greed. He could be used with conquest in some cases, and he could be used even with brilliant energy. In Otherworld Battle, I would actually place him in a mid A tier. I think that when a lot of the metas are debuffed, I think he's a top choice. He's not particularly debuffed a lot in the season of Otherworld Battle, and if you build him right, he can one shot or he can last a very, very long time in the fight. And he's easily ranked A tier. In AC, I think that he's ranked more in like the middle B tier. I think that he's good in a niche team, but not really a primary team. He could work with a lot of powerful mutants that are still solid in AC. So he definitely has a lot of uses. All right, the next one we have on this list is Black Swan. Black Swan is another underrated tune, but she leaves a lot to be desired at level 70. But she has a lot of unique abilities that are exclusive to her, especially the one where when she reaches a certain percentage of health, she gets 100% defense. And the only way to really beat her is if you have plenty of offense with a proc of some sort. And even then, sometimes you can't really get through that defense. Decreased damage received, has super guard break, has decent long iframes that penetrate, debuff removal for all allies, so that also makes her usable in auto modes. I think in timeline battle, I would definitely rank her more in the C tier category. I think she's usable there, but I don't think that she's a top choice there by any means. Definitely not in the top league, but definitely not completely useless. In Otherworld Battle, I would actually rank her more or less into C tier also. I think she's usable, but I think now with a lot of new characters coming out, I think there's better choices. AC, I would probably also categorize her into C tier. Definitely like can be used as a leadership, could tank a lot of skills, is meant to be used with CTPs like regen or maybe authority. He's usable there, but it's for like a niche team. All right, next on the list we've got a bit of a newer character in Black Widow, and she got a very good upgrade, and she's a symbiote, so she can work well with a support like Agent Venom. She does need to be tier 4 to get the very, very best out of her, and I would build her for DPS. I think she does lack it, so I think that giving her a brilliant greed, or if you want to just use her in auto modes, giving her a brilliant conquest would suffice. She has decent abilities. She has a lot of evasion. She has guaranteed dodge. She does have super guard break. She has penetration. She has heal. Her skills are cancelable, but the delay is quite long. I do think she could be a little bit overrated in timeline battle. I would definitely say she's more like in the middle of C. Her one shot potential is just not really there, but she does have some uses, like she could trigger debuff removal. She has a very long iframe. She can maybe tank skills at tier 4, but she's not really the best choice for timeline battle, of course. For Otherworld Battle, I would actually consider her more in the B tier range, especially when she's combined with Agent Venom. She can be a very, very good dealer, and she can do very, very high burst damage, and she could stay for a solid period of time in the fight as well. In AC, I would consider her the range of middle of B tier. I think, she could be paired with Agent Venom, but in AC it's less likely. You could pair her with other supports, and she could do fairly well in niche team up selections, and she does have some uses there. She also has self debuff removal, I forgot to mention, so she doesn't need a debuff removal leadership. All right, next on the list, we've got Blue Dragon. Blue Dragon's a bit of an old character, and she was always meant to be used for niche kind of team up selections, and she actually came before Otherworld Battle even came out. I think she has some very interesting abilities, but it's abilities that she can use in some of PvP, not all. She has Super Guard Break, self debuff removal to all warriors of the sky. She has an ignore iframe counter, which is pretty decent. Decent burst damage. Heal. She has some cancelable skills, and she does have penetration. Combined with Sunbird, she has a revive. Unfortunately, that can't be used in timeline battle, ranking her as probably a D tier character. By herself as a standalone, the counter is usually not enough. She has to survive much longer. She needs Sunbird, and Sunbird is definitely not a recommendation in any PvP except Otherworld Battle and AC. In Otherworld Battle, she is definitely a middle B tier character, and this is actually very good for somebody as old as she is as a character. She has an amazing 6 skill that could potentially one shot. You could build her for DPS, maybe greed you could use. You could build her for defense. You can give her, a brilliant regen. You can give her an authority. She's very good here. AC, I would give her more in like the high C tier range. She's good with Sunbird, and she's meant to be paired with Sunbird, and she's good against niche teams, which is good enough for her in that mode. All right, next up on this list, we have Captain America. Captain America was always built for PvP, but seems to always be on the lower end scale of it. He's somewhere in the top 25 to 30 range. He's useful there, but he's definitely limited in his abilities, especially since he relies on Weapon Hex to give him that revive he desperately needs. Other than that, though, he has some self debuff removal and damage immunity. He has decreased damage received of a decent amount. He has super guard break on a counter skill. He has penetration. He has decent heal. He has invincibility. Despite his solid defense and burst damage, all zombies rely on a CTP with super guard break immunity. Unfortunately, I would have to rank him in the D tier range in timeline battle. I don't think that he could really do enough to compete there. he needs Weapon Hex, and Weapon Hex also is not the best choice for a timeline battle for sure. However, in Otherworld battle, he is definitely on the lower end of B tier. He doesn't get debuffed often, so he's a very, very good choice when most of the meta is debuffed, and he could be built all kinds of different ways because of this. He could be built with Conquest, Greed, hybrid with Rage if you want. He has use there no matter what, so long as you pair him with Weapon Hex, which he most likely is. In AC, I would also rank him in middle of B tier because with Weapon Hex, he could take on a lot of different niche teams. I've even had people tell me that they could even counter like weaker meta teams if they're built properly. Otherworld Battle and AC is where Captain America will definitely shine if you want to use him in PvP. All right, next on the list, we've got Carnage. Now, Carnage is a very, very good character. There's lots of different ways you can build him. He's very, very PvP oriented. He has a lot of good abilities, and one that's unique to him is a debuff called Panic. And after a while, when the AI cancels its own debuff removal, that panic debuff is going to spike Carnage's offense by a lot, even with a defensive CTP like everybody's favorite to recommend on him, Brilliant Egg. Carnage has got Super Guard Break, he's got decreased damage received, he has debuff removal to himself and to symbiotes as a leadership, which is very good. He has immortality. He has heal on his skills. He has cancelable skills. A lot of debuff potential. He's not a debuff master, but he carries a lot of debuffs on his skills. Also carries penetration at a very high percent. All of the stats to make him one of the best, probably the top 5 in PvP. In Timeline Battle, though, I would actually rank him at his lowest there, which is A tier. The reason why is because when you give him something like a Brilliant Refinement, he needs Agent Venom's extra defense, and he's overly rely on it, and he arguably won't have the burst damage that's required to kill a lot of meta. Whereas with a burst damage CTP like Brilliant Greed or Brilliant Energy, he could easily take down the opposition. And in Timeline Battle, he could kill a lot of different meta and one-shot them. However, in Otherworld Battle, where he shines much, much more, he's ranked middle of A tier. That's where you get to see the best of him with Brilliant Egg. And he could wipe out a lot in an Otherworld Battle fight. And he has a lot of good burst damage, and he's not really debuffed very often in the week. In AC, however, in AC, I would easily rank him into S tier. He combines perfectly with Knull, making the team very, very difficult. Probably one of the most difficult teams in AC at the moment. So, with knowing all this, it's important that you build Carnage based on how well you've built your card stats. All right, next on this list, we've got Colossus. Lord Colossus, everybody. Now, he is more of a support. He doesn't have a lot of utility as a DPS character. He's more of a defensive support with a 6 skill that you could maybe use in niche areas of the match, maybe against physical damage dealers like Wolverine. He actually doesn't have penetration on his base kit. He doesn't have super guard break. He just has the decreased damage received. He has a fair amount of iframes. He has some heal. He has the physical reflect. In Timeline Battle, though, in Timeline Battle, people do use him as probably the second best support in the game. And for that reason, I'm putting him in the lower B tier category. You could put him as a dealer to get the best out of his 6 skill, which is pretty efficient. In Otherworld Battle, he's more on the C tier range because supports aren't really highly mandatory. I think the more meta you have in Otherworld Battle team, potentially the better. So in this category, he's definitely more in C tier. He will really never use his 6 skill and he just goes out there to die. In AC, I would also rank him in C tier. Agent Venom being the best support in the game, he has lost his mantle and he's now only for decent niche setups in AC. All right, next on the list, we got the brand new, just came out yesterday, Crescent. And I put her on this list probably on the borderline like 35 or 40th, like in PvP. She does have some unique abilities. However, in auto modes, it can't really be used efficiently, especially since Crescent is more built for the other side of the game, PvE. So a lot of people are going to build her with Rage, but I think you could also maybe build her with Destruction to get her to at least be a little bit hybrid and have another chance to penetrate in auto modes. Otherwise, you have to combine the 5th skill with the 3rd skill in order to do the damage that's necessary. She does have penetration. She has ignore iframe, decreased damage received, cancelable skills. She has some decent abilities. Timeline battle, I honestly think I'm adamant that she's usable, and I would put her in C tier. I think that she could trigger debuff removal, and she could potentially have one-shot capabilities. She's already getting very high scores in PvE, so that means that she has very high burst damage. So that's the only place where you're really gonna get some use out of her. In the other game modes, like Otherworld Battle, I'll put her in D tier. Not heard good things about her. She's only utilizing her 3rd skill and then goes out to die. Same with AC. AC, I would probably put her in D tier. She doesn't prioritize her 5th skill. Her 5th skill needs to be used first in order for the 3rd skill to work efficiently. Alright, next on this list, we got the new boy, Daredevil. And unfortunately, he is not what people have expected. He's pretty disappointing. They kind of built him the same, and counters, they could be a bit outdated. So it's very disappointing that a character without a revive got a counter and it's not as good anymore. Even though the counter has penetration, has very, very good burst damage, invincibility. He has some decreased damage received, which is good for his speed. He has guaranteed dodge. Does have super guard break on the 1 skill. He does have a little bit of debuff removal on his counter as well. So he has some abilities that are good, but he just cannot survive. In timeline battle, pretty self-explanatory. Can't really use him that well. Probably a D tier. He is capable of a kill, which is good, but that is not good enough in timeline battle when there's tons of double support teams. In Otherworld Battle, also can't really be used very much. He goes out there to die, maybe use 1 skill. It's not really good enough for the character. Needs to do more. Hopefully they fix him, but this is definitely in the D tier range. Where he really shines though is in AC. It's kind of in the middle of B tier. Doesn't really need too much to enhance him. He is capable of one-shot potential if you build him with something like Brilliant Greed, or if you build him with Brilliant Conquest and the team doesn't have support, he could definitely counter you a couple more times. He does have some use in AC at least. All right, next on this list we've got Deadpool, and Deadpool is pretty favorable amongst people who use him. He is pretty decent. He has a lot of good abilities about him. Feel like he's missing some abilities though. Like he's missing super guard break and he's missing maybe some guaranteed dodge as a speed. But he does have good abilities. He has a counter with penetration. He has decreased damage received, which is always good, especially for a speed. He has immortality. He can give debuff removal to himself as a leadership. He used to give debuff removal to all allies as a leadership, but can no longer do that. He does have cancelable skills. One you have to delay, one you could insta cancel, which is beneficial. He's pretty useful in the auto game modes. He's not really useful as much in timeline battle. I use him more as a utility in timeline battle, which is very rare for a person to be that versatile in this game, where you could use him as a insight support that triggers debuff removal, and then you could also use him as a DPS character. Unfortunately, though, I'm going to put him in the high C tier. I think, like, even at tier 4, you need to give him a brilliant offensive CTP to probably get the best out of him. And even then, it's still too 50-50, especially on auto. He's not very good. But C tier is definitely usable. Otherworld Battle, he definitely ranks in the low A tier. He's very good there, especially when you build him with Greed. He can even be used as a debuff tune if you want with Greed. He can still get some kills, which is very good. And if you build him with Conquest, which a lot of people recommend for him, he can survive for a very long time in Otherworld Battle, and he's not debuffed often. So he shines there, and he also shines in AC, being a counter to Warlock and even some cases Knull, and he's definitely ranked in high A tier. He's very good in AC, and that's where you're going to get the best out of him. All right, the next character we have on this list is the disappointed one, Doctor Doom. Pretty annoying to look at right now, and how hard he's fallen since Null. He's pretty clunky, even though he has a lot of good PvP abilities. He's very slow, and his cooldown is off, and his skills are pretty delayed. You can't really cancel them either. Good things about him though, he has decreased damage received. He has a lot of super guard break. He has a revive. He has debuff removal lead with debuff removal on his counter skill, which is super outdated. He has some heal. He has penetration. So he has a lot of good abilities, but he is quite limited because his counter is not ignore iframe. It's a counter, so he has to get hit, but there's a lot of people who one-shot him. So he's very frustrating. In Timeline Battle, he is a D tier character. I personally have no use for him at all. He's too slow, too weak. The recommended CTPs of Authority and even Transcendence, Greed make him too weak to compete. In Otherworld Battle, he's much better. He's more of like in the middle lower end of B tier. He's very good. He can potentially get a kill, a surprise kill, decent dealer. He doesn't get debuffed often, so he can be used often. At tier 4, he's very good there. In AC, maybe like on the low end of B tier. I think he does have some use there. He could kill a lot of niche teams. He has leadership to all allies, so he can have some use there. Next on this list, we got Ghost Rider, my man. He's somewhat limited in timeline battle, otherworld battle AC, but his burst damage is undeniable. and he does have very, very good PvP abilities, very good hybrid use. So you can put him with a rage and he'll still perform pretty much the same in PvP. He's got increased damage to supervillains, very, very high percentage. He's got decreased damage received. He's got super guard break. He's got immortality. He's got cancelable iframes, penetration. He's got a lot of good abilities. He just lacks iframes that have priority. That's his main issue. And his best skill is not an iframe, so it relies on super guard break a lot. However, in timeline battle, he is definitely usable and probably on the high end of C tier, as he could be a decent counter to Knull, and he usually gets into 1% often. Can't even trap him at times. He does have debuffs on his skills and could also trigger a debuff removal. It's just Ghost Rider struggles a lot against heroes like Sentry. So that's where he's going to struggle. Usually kind of a one-trick pony as well. In Otherworld Battle, he's definitely on the high end of B tier. He doesn't get debuffed often. He's a great dealer, like starter. He definitely packs a punch in all of his skills. He can wipe out like at least two, sometimes three meta on the board. In AC, I would put him though middle of B tier. I think, him having immortality is always going to be beneficial for him. He's going to do a lot of burst damage, and as long as you pair him with someone with debuff removal, he can wipe out a lot of niche teams. All right, next on this list, we have Gorr. Even though he was the first to get a lot of abilities and was previously meta for a fair period of time. He's very good for a level 70. He's got penetration, he's got decreased damage received, he's got super guard break, and he's got super guard break immunity natively on his kit. He was one of the first to get both of those statistics, making him ahead of his time. He's got revive, he's got debuff removal to himself and to villains. He has cancelable skills. He has iframes, ignore iframes, and he's an all-around great character. If he was a tier 4, he would be very, very good. But he's level 70, and he's somewhat outdated, so he doesn't do the DPS anymore. It's hard to recommend CTPs on him. Maybe you can give him DPS, and he can do some damage in some of the auto game modes. But in timeline battle, I would definitely rank him in the low end of C tier. I think he's usable there to trigger debuff removal, maybe to get a kill on the older meta if you have DPS on him, but he's definitely not recommended, of course, obviously not. In Otherworld Battle, I would also put him in C tier. He has an animation on his revive that negates his value, and it slows down his ability to attack. He prioritizes the wrong skills at the wrong time, so he's not like the best choice for Otherworld Battle, even with a revive. For AC, I would put him in the middle of C tier. I think that him having debuff removal makes him useful for villain ally niche teams, and he could eliminate a lot of niche teams, and he can still be pretty useful there. All right, next on this list, we've got Hela. Hela is definitely underrated. She's not used very often, but for those who use her, they always rave about how great she is and how she has great burst damage and how she surprise kills a lot of different meta, which I'm not surprised at all, given that she has a very, very powerful counter with very, very long iframes, decreased damage received, and she has increased damage to heroes. She has penetration, she has immortality, she has cancelable skills, she has some heal, She's a great all-arounder. She's a support character. You can build her mostly for DPS. You could build her with destruction, most people do. You could build her with liberation or insight. You can build her with brilliant regen because she's very tanky. She's CTP versatile. In timeline battle, I would put her probably in the middle of B tier. I think she's much more usable than the characters at C tier because she carries everything that C tier characters have and then some. She also has a lot of burst damage and she has a support utility, which is very good. Otherworld Battle, she is definitely in B tier in Otherworld Battle. She's very good there, doesn't get debuffed as often, very good one-shot potential, can survive for long periods of the fight, can be the difference in some teams because she's support, and is definitely a sleeper character there too. So people underestimate her there. In AC, I would also put her in B tier. She really helps in villain teams, can wipe out a lot of different meta if she's built correctly. And Otherworld Battle in AC is where you're definitely going to get the best out of her. All right, next on this list, we have Hulk, and it's the older version of Hulk. It is not the newer version of Hulk. I don't think that version is good enough in PvP, but this version of Hulk can still be used in niche areas. He has some of the highest HP in the game, and his damage is based off of it. If you're crazy enough and really want to use him, you can equip him with something like a Conquest, and he can do well against characters like Wolverine. Same with Authority. He really benefits with Steel and Invincibility. He has an Ignore iframe with a low amount of penetration. He has decreased damage received, Super Guard Break, somewhat of a cancelable skill, but he lacks iframes. He does have debuff removal on his second skill. Hulk does have some decent abilities, but him lacking a revive leaves a lot to be desired. And his defense isn't high enough for him to compete. And his offense is not very good either. In timeline battle, he is now moved more to like the middle of D tier. He needs support on both ends to even compete. I think that ranking him here is pretty fair and he's pretty outdated. In Otherworld Battle, he's a little bit better. He's C tier. He's definitely a niche choice, but he's definitely not the worst choice. He can be decent as a starter, can kill some meta, and isn't completely useless there. In AC, I also think he's not completely useless. He's C tier. I think that he could be paired with somebody with debuff removal like Gorr, and they could take on a lot of solid niche teams and win. Does have some value there. All right, next on this list we have Invisible Woman, who has really unique abilities. She initially came out with some promise, but now she's mostly used kind of as a debuff removal support. I like to use her for a long period of time. She has a very strong awaken skill. She has very good burst damage. She has amazing debuffs like Charm that could trap the opponent before they even get and trigger debuff removal. So it's very unique to her. She has decreased damage received and Super Guard Break. She gives debuff removal to all allies, and it's a passive, it's not a leadership. So it can be applied in Otherworld Battle, fair amount of heal, and she has cancelable skills, penetration, and very good burst damage. So I think she's underrated, even in areas like Timeline Battle. I think she's not completely useless. I think she's like somewhere in the range of C tier. I've had her kill multiple different meta support CTP like Mighty Insight and Mighty Liberation. She's also good with Disruption. She could also be good with Authority, maybe even Brilliant Regen. She has a lot of versatility to her. It could show in Otherworld Battle where she's not debuffed often and she gives a great passive that's almost mandatory to the entire team. So in Otherworld Battle, she is definitely in lower end of B tier. She's one of the best support choices for a team. In AC, however, lower end of B tier range or C tier range, I think when you pair her with Franklin Richards, I think she could easily get into this B tier category. She could kill some decent teams, some good niche teams, and she could also be a support for a team if you choose. She has a lot of versatility. All right, next on this list we have Jean Grey, and I still think that she's quite usable. She's retained her value for a pretty long time, and she has a lot of very good abilities. She's a very good hybrid character. I think that she's primarily a rage toon. It gets the best out of her best attribute, which is her burst damage, a revive. She has decreased damage received. She has increased pierce. She has decreased pierce damage received. Penetration, cancelable skills, heal. She gives debuff removal to all allies, and her tier 4 striker has reflect. So she has the whole package. Problem is, her best skills aren't iframes. So she struggles in the auto modes because she doesn't prioritize the right iframes that give her the right stats. In something like Timeline Battle, I think that she has value there still, and I would rank her in the middle of B tier. She has amazing burst damage. She can kill a lot of meta. She's a decent leadership. She's very, very good on manual play. She's a debuff master, and she still retains some value there. In Otherworld Battle, I will consider her more in the A tier range because of her revive and her ability to super guard break. She is often picked in the first week. She's not debuffed as much as you would think. So she does have a lot of value there still. In AC, however, I would put her probably at the lower end of B tier. I think that with her cost, she has a relatively niche value in AC. She doesn't prioritize her iframes. Hard to combine all of her skills together, but she's otherwise a great lead and usable there and good in niche team ups. Next up, we got Knull. Don't gotta say much about him. Crazy DPS, crazy survivability. He's a symbiote, works with Agent Venom. Just unbelievably strong, very CTP versatile. I've seen people work with him with Brilliant Conquest. Not the most favorable choice, but still works. Brilliant Greed on him, and people pick even Rage on him, and he can do some fair bit of hybrid use. He has Ignore iframe with a very low cooldown, Immortality, decreased damage received. He has increased chain hit. He has increased pierce. He has a debuff removal passive to himself. He has heal, massive heal. Even on his tier 4 striker, he has massive heal. He has cancelable iframes. He has invincibility and damage immunity. Penetration. He has super guard break. Always has invincibility and always has debuff removal, so he practically has super guard break immunity. The guy is a complete character, and he is relentless. He is S tier in all game modes, without question. Even in Otherworld Battle, when he is debuffed all the time, he's still S tier. Timeline Battle, S tier. He's the most used character in Timeline Battle. Not even up for debate. Otherworld Battle, he's S tier because with Greed, he could be used as a debuffed character and he could still kill a lot of different opponents even when he's practically dead. He has the highest immortality, always going to be 7 seconds, in-game seconds, I specify. Still going to be used there. He's the most used debuff tool in Otherworld Battle by far. So he's S tier. AC, S tier. Best team is him paired with Carnage and Agent Venom. They pretty much completely dominate the best regions, and he is the biggest threat. Alright, next on this list, Madelyn Pryor. She's pretty good in PvP, but she's not really worth the cost. She does have decent abilities, but she seems very slow and very clunky, and the range of her skills is kind of off. So, decreased damage received, which is very good. She has increased pierce damage, has super guard break, she has immortality, she has debuff removal for all allies, cancelable iframes, counter that does very, very good burst damage. She has penetration as well. She also uniquely has a very quick ability to activate her tier 4 striker. It's some of the quickest in the game. Plus, since she's better for the auto modes, she's good with a variety of different CTPs, including Greed, Conquest, Egg, and Authority. You can build her for burst damage or you can build her for survivability. In Timeline Battle, I would definitely rank her in high C tier. I think she's usable, but her being just usable is not really good enough for her to rank higher on the list. There's much better tier 4 choices for PvP that are out there at this moment. For Otherworld Battle, though, I would put her at the high end of B tier. She's a top choice. She's not debuffed as often. She definitely has high burst damage to kill a lot of niche meta. And she's a good starter. In AC, I would put her also at the high end of B tier. I think she's very usable there in a niche team up. She's, gives debuff removal, so she's got a good leadership. Immortality characters will always do well in AC. So she definitely does have some use still, despite not having a uniform. Alright, next on the list we have Magik. She's a very interesting character as she has a lot of niche capabilities and is capable of killing a lot of different meta with a counter that I keep saying is outdated, but she has the strongest counter in the game with the smallest cooldown. She does, however, have her limitations. She doesn't really have that much heal except on that counter. So if you don't activate the counter, it leaves her pretty open to getting killed. She has super guard break on it. She has decreased damage received. She has penetration. Maybe one cancelable skill. She doesn't have many iframes though. She's very clunky. She doesn't have debuff removal either. She is lacking some abilities, but that doesn't stop her from one-shotting Knull. I think she's only a brilliant greed tune. I think giving her a conquest, I think, is not ideal. If you want to do it, you can. It's maybe her second best choice, but I only recommend Brilliant Greed. In Timeline Battle, she is actually on the higher end of B tier. I think she's very usable as a support DPS. She can kill some meta, especially combat meta, like Carnage and Wolverine, and she does have more value than most. Otherworld Battle, I think she's also at like the middle of B tier. I think they fixed her so her skills are more prioritized now because before she would just do one counter and stand, but now I think they fixed her so I could safely put her in the middle of B tier and she still kills a lot of niche meta. She's decent there. In AC, she is definitely on the lower end of A tier. I'm hearing very good reviews about her that she's consistently getting nulls to 1%. So she's probably the most used in niche team ups, and she is a sleeper character, and that's where you're gonna get the best out of her. All right, next on this list we have Emma Frost, another previously meta tune that is very, very outdated. She has unique abilities, but she's not a tier 4, so they can't really be used to the best of her ability. So I'll be brief with her. She's got penetration, she's got decreased damage received on a skill for a certain time period. So if it gets removed, will probably die very, very fast. So she needs debuff removal, but she doesn't have it. She does have some guaranteed dodge, which is unique for a blast. Cancelable iframes. Those iframes don't really have as much burst damage though, or reflect of all damage, which is very useful, and she'll always be somewhat useful for this reason. However, in timeline battle, she is not usable anymore. She is definitely in D tier in timeline battle. She can maybe get some residual damage kills, but she is not going to get kills on meta like she used to anymore. Otherworld Battle, same thing. Unfortunately, she's D tier. Can't really be used in Otherworld Battle. Doesn't prioritize. Doesn't do burst damage. You know, you're gonna give her Mighty Authority or something like this, and it's not gonna give her enough burst damage. In AC though, that's where you're gonna get some use out of her. I wouldn't put her in D tier. I would put her in C tier. I think that she can be used in niche circumstances against maybe energy damage dealers. You can get some surprise kills if you put Brilliant Authority or Brilliant Regen on her. All right, next on this list we have Mr. Fantastic. Lowly rated when he first arrived, has since kind of found his value more or less in PvP, somewhere in top 30, and he does have some fair burst damage, and he can be built maybe with like a Mighty Conquest if you want to build him for the auto PvP modes. He has decreased damage received, he has penetration, and he has a counter, but he does not have super guard break. I think he may have a heal somewhere, but it's not very present. Don't know if he has cancelable skills. I don't think he does. He very, very much relies on Franklin Richards to be of any value. You can immediately say that he is D tier in timeline battle. He is not going to be used there. He doesn't have the burst damage to compete, nor the survivability, and that is unfortunate for the character. However, in Otherworld Battle, I would put him at the lower end of B tier. He's one of the best niche team ups in Otherworld Battle when majority of the meta are debuffed, and I think that's where you're going to get the best out of Reed Richards combined with Sue and Franklin. In AC, I'll put him in high end of C tier. I think he's usable there. I think with Sue and Franklin, he could have some surprise kills and does have some value there. All right, next on this list we have Punisher, the new guy. He does have some decent value in PvP. One of his best assets is his burst damage, so he could be put with Brilliant Conquest and you can do pretty well in the auto modes, or if you want to give him a greed, he could maybe get a surprise kill. He has decreased damage received, he has decreased pierce damage, and he has self debuff removal on his artifacts. So he doesn't need a debuff removal lead or passive to succeed. He has ignore iframe. He has cancelable skills. He has some heal. He has penetration. So this makes him pretty fair, even despite not having a revive. If you were to rank him in timeline battle, I would definitely put him in C tier. I think he's usable there. He can trigger debuff removal, or you can get a surprise kill on a lot of different meta, even at a low area in his build. So he's definitely usable there. And he's not like the worst character to pick in timeline battle. Otherworld battle, I would rank him in the high end of C tier. Not having a revive leaves a lot to be desired, but the fact that his best skill, his fourth skill, is long range, it could kind of give him the ability to potentially one shot in a niche kind of situation. He's not really going to thrive in Otherworld battle. AC, he's much higher on the list in the middle of B tier. I think he's very good. He has one shot ability, doesn't need debuff removal because he has it in his artifact. So he could be paired with a lot of different team ups and still be arguably one of the best in your team in that niche team up. All right, next on this list we have Quicksilver. I would say he's another sleeper character as he has a lot of amazing abilities but really lacks survivability, which is why he could be a little bit limited, but getting the best out of him is a very rewarding experience. He has a lot of good abilities. He's got super guard break. He has guaranteed dodge. He has true dodge on his tier 4 striker. He has plenty of debuffs, making him a debuff master. He has an ignore iframe that's very long and on a relatively low cooldown. His rankings are more for the autoplay modes, even though he does have some value on manual play. So in timeline battle, I would rank him more as a C tier character. He's definitely usable there, and I've even killed Knulls with him being able to fully debuff for a long period of time, but he can get caught by ignore dodge, which is probably his biggest weakness. Otherworld battle, he's definitely somewhere in the middle of B tier. I think he's a top speed choice. He doesn't get debuffed often. He's a great starter, and he's able to one-shot opponents. You could build him with Brilliant Conquest, Brilliant Greed, or even make him a little bit of hybrid and equip him with Rage. He's very versatile, and he does a lot of great burst damage. In AC, I would also rank him in the middle of B tier. He could pretty much one-shot a lot of niche team-ups, and he's pretty good. He doesn't need debuff removal as he has it on his fourth skill, so he is versatile in his playability despite lacking a debuff removal leadership. Next on this list, we have Rachel Summers, a bit of an underused toon, but it's hard to really rate her because there's not much testing done on her, and her abilities are decent, but they're kind of lacking, and I'll explain why. Rachel has super guard break, she has decreased damage received, she has self debuff removal and to all Phoenix allies, so that's pretty decent, mostly used for like the autoplay modes. But she has no ignore iframe. She does have the penetration, and she does have a couple of iframes, but no ignore iframe. She does, however, carry a revive, and a 6 skill combined could make a deadly combination if you build her the right way. I would recommend Destruction to give her a proc, or just mostly build her for DPS. So, in Timeline Battle, I completely don't use her at all. I never have. I've never really seen anybody use her, and I would rank her in D tier. I don't think anybody has used her for any period of time whatsoever, and I don't really think she's very usable there with her lack of iframes. Even though she can be used as a dealer to get that 6 skill off, I still think that it may not be as strong. In AC, however, I would rank her lower B tier category. I think that she has more use there, and she doesn't really need somebody to give her any leadership, and she definitely can one shot against some niche teams. In Otherworld Battle, I would also rank her in the low B tier. I think that she's definitely a sleeper tune and can really benefit when most of the meta are debuffed. And she can take down a lot of opposition that don't really have ignore iframe. Next on this list, we have Sentry. I don't really have to explain too much about him. He is pretty overpowered. Even with the addition of Knull, he has basically everything at his disposal, from removing buffs from the target to constant debuff removal to constant ignore iframe to being a debuff master to having almost every one of his skills being iframes, having almost every one of his skills have super guard break. He himself also has super guard break immunity as well. He has revive, he has heal. He's basically perfect. There's almost nothing wrong with him. You can build him in multiple different ways, including with Brilliant Conquest, Brilliant Greed, or even Brilliant Regen if you have one to spare. He also has increased chain hit, and he has increased pierce damage. Timeline Battle, he's the second most picked meta in the game, right behind Knull. He's basically unkillable at times. Gives the whole team debuff removal, so he's good there. And he's also good with that ability for AC. In AC, he's S tier. He's a counter to the number one in the game, and basically a counter to every other meta. He could combine well with Colossus, and he's a very, very difficult opponent to kill. Otherworld Battle, the reason why he is S tier is because when he has Brilliant Greed, he could one-shot opposition even while debuffed. Only Knull and Sentry have this ability, putting them in a very high ranking. Next on the list, we have Sersi, and this is a pretty old uniform, but this uniform still packs a punch and easily cruises into the top 30 in PvP, no doubt. She has a lot of damage, while she lacks penetration and is probably overly reliant on a single CTP like Destruction. She has a lot of good abilities like increased damage, decreased damage, targeted mostly towards villains. She has self-debuff removal with super guard break. She has a revive, some cancelable iframes. Her ranking in Timeline Battle, I would probably say, is a C. I think she's usable. She has a 6 skill that's really strong, and you could deal with her so you can get the most out of that 6 skill. And she can also trigger debuff removal, and she's a fairly decent PvP tune all around. But of course, she's not going to be worth it in Timeline Battle. Otherworld battle though, she's definitely in a low B tier. She's a decent choice when most of the meta is debuffed. She's pretty strong and could one shot. Is a good starter as well. A sleeper character there. I would put her in AC at a solid C tier. I think that she's still usable there, especially with Eternal teams, which is like a niche team that could take on a lot of other niche teams. And she's all around old usable non-tier Fortune. All right, next on this list, we have Silver Surfer, who is one of the top PvP tunes in the game, but he's actually more difficult to use than the others. He's got a lot of abilities, some that are unique to him, but he's also missing some abilities as well. He plays a little bit clunky and slow. His skills are actually cancelable. A counter that helps reflect under an ignore iframe, but also carries super guard break hidden within it. And it's the only skill in Surfer's kit that actually has super guard break. Very long iframes. He has a lot of debuffs and a cancelable fort skill. He has decreased damage received. He has reflect. His skills also give the chance to miss an attack, which is pretty interesting. He gives debuff removal lead, of course. He has a revive. He has penetration. In timeline battle, he's S tier rank. He's paired with Knull very often. He's a great leadership for Knull, giving him extra defense and a little bit of attack. He's very good paired with Agent Venom, as Agent Venom gives him a lot of defense. He can work with Brilliant Conquest. He can work with Authority in a triple meta. He can work with all kinds of CTPs. I've had Transcendence work on him before. He is an S tier character, for sure, when he's fully built especially. In Otherworld battle, I would put him down. I would consider him A tier. He's debuffed a lot, and when he is debuffed, because he has defensive CTPs, he's not particularly usable when he's debuffed. So while I think he's very powerful, sometimes he doesn't get debuffed for the week. He's still on A tier. However, in AC, I easily categorize him in S tier. He's paired with one of the toughest AC teams in the game that take Region 5, which is Silver Surfer, Knull, and Agent Venom. They dominate, and they're extremely hard to put down, especially when you're fighting top alliances. So never underestimate Surfer. All right, next on the list, we have Spider-Man, and I'm actually referring to both of these uniforms. I think this one is more suited for timeline battle, and this uniform is more suited for the auto modes. Spider-Man is very, very strong, has amazing burst damage. With both of these uniforms, it seems like he's meant for Conquest. Conquest completes the character. The character has everything at his disposal. He has increased damage to villains, excludes decreased damage by a certain percentage when he's attacking, which is very unique to him. He has invisibility, which is very unique to him. He has guaranteed dodge. He's a symbiote, so he combines well with Agent Venom, giving him decreased damage received. He could remove buffs from the target. He has a very low cooldown on his skills. He has ignore iframe, and he has iframes, but they're not really cancelable. That's probably his one main weakness. He also has damage procs, heal, and invincibility. In timeline battle, I think he's definitely on the lower end of B tier. I think that he can kill lots of meta. I think he could pair well with both Colossus and Agent Venom and work well with a Mighty Conquest. He will also have enough damage if you have him built well to take on a lot of different combats at specific moments. I think he's very good on manual. Otherworld battle, I would consider him more in the middle of B tier. I think he's probably on par with Quicksilver. He could take out a few meta at a time, especially if he's starting or finishing the match. In AC, I think he's also in B tier. He could pair well with symbiotes. He does well with Colossus as well. So he could be in a niche team or he could be on a main team. He could have his skills activate right away and he's going to prioritize his best skill right away. All in all, Spider-Man, very good character. All right, next on this list, we have Stryfe, and he's not even tier 4, but he packs the amount of damage of a tier 4. I have him specially built with energy, so it bumps up his damage efficiently. I honestly think this may be the only CTP that currently works on him right now, because he's not really worth a conquest. He would only be good in Otherworld battle. He's not really good in AC because he should be getting burst damage as much as he can. And with defensive CTBs, he just doesn't get the burst damage that he needs. And he doesn't have the survivability ever. He used to be good with Conquest, but now he's not. He has a lot of interesting abilities. He's very similar to Warlock, but he lacks a lot of Warlock's abilities. Self-debuff removal, and he also gives it to the whole team as a passive. He has a very high amount of decreased damage received. He does have super guard break. He has good iframes, and he's a debuff master, so he can debuff you for a very, very long period in the fight. He also has heal. He has a one-shot and a counter. So in timeline battle, I would give his rank a C. I think he's very usable there, but he's obviously not recommended. I have gotten plenty of kills with him though. I think that he still has a lot of potential as a luxurious character. And he's definitely not the worst character to pick. In Otherworld battle, I would consider him on the low end of B tier. He's mostly used as a support, so if you wanted to, you could probably give him Insight or Liberation, and he would provide very good support as well as debuff removal for your whole team, which is pretty mandatory. Even if he's debuffed, you could still use him, or you could use him as a DPS. In AC, however, he is in the low C tier category. I think that he's good in niche team-ups. There's always going to be better choices. If you built him as a DPS in AC, he could use his skills from long distance to get a kill, which is pretty decent. But otherwise, it's just a luxury character whose potential is yet to be unleashed. Alright, next on this list, we have Thanos. Thanos is a very interesting character who has a lot of exclusive and unique skills, but at the same time, he's lacking a revive that really makes him a fierce competitor. He has a lot of strengths. He's got increased damage to debuff removal. So any tunes that have debuff removal active, he does a lot of extra damage to. He does increased damage to heroes. He has decreased damage received by 55%, which is the most in PvP. So that means that he greatly benefits with any kind of steel, whether it's a mighty level steel or brilliant level steel of authority. Increased pierce damage. He has super guard break. He has remove all buffs. he has an ignore iframe skill with debuff removal that has a very low cooldown. I think around like 3.5 seconds. Problem is that he removes his leadership of debuff removal that he can also apply to villains. He overwrites it with that skill. So that skill is his best skill, and it could also be his worst. Has a fit skill that does a lot of damage and gives debuff immunity and invincible. It also has a lot of reflect negation. So while he's using it, he doesn't get reflected. He has cancelable skills a lot. He has iframes, and he's very, very good offensively with a defensive support. These are all his strengths. In timeline battle, I would rank him in A tier and probably on the lower end of A tier. And the reason why is because he benefits with Mighty Authority. He can one-shot every meta except Knull. So he's basically a counter to everybody except him, which is pretty solid. He's very good on manual and on 1v1. That's where he actually shines the most. But he's also not the best choice, unfortunately. For Otherworld Battle, I would consider him in the middle of B tier. I think that he's actually kind of fallen there. With Mighty Authority, it doesn't particularly work as well. The only way he could work is if he's starting, but he tends to get killed by debuff tunes quite often. So there's actually better choices than him out there, even when he isn't debuffed. In AC, I would rank him also into middle of B tier. I think that's good for him. I think he could be a leadership for villains in a primary team. He's also one of the top niche teams in AC. With all of his skills ready to go, he proves that he could be a deadly opponent, but otherwise leaves himself to be an angry titan with a lot of untapped potential. Next on this list, we have Weapon Hex, who's another underrated toon in my opinion. She has a lot of very, very good abilities. She's rather fun to use. However, she can be very, very tricky to use, as a lot of her skills have partial iframes, so you can see her going in and out of them, and she could kind of get interrupted at times. But if she doesn't get interrupted, she could be very deadly. She does rely on CTPs that give her super guard break immunity. So that includes Greed, I recommend. Authority could work. Conquest could work, because she's primarily for the auto PvP modes. She's got increased damage and decreased damage received. She has immortality. She has immortality to all zombies, including herself. She has super guard break. She has cancelable skills. She has penetration. And she's probably the best zombie out of all of them. Timeline battle, I would definitely rank her in C tier. I think she's usable. I think she's capable of kills against the meta. I think that she triggers debuff removal. She definitely has some use. She doesn't need debuff removal herself because she grants herself debuff removal. That makes her a little bit more versatile in the team selections and the team ups. But of course, timeline battle is not where she's going to shine. She's going to shine in Otherworld battle, where she's definitely on the middle end of B tier. I think that she's very, very useful. She's a top choice when all of the meta are debuffed. And she's a great starter and can be a great finisher. She also removes buffs from the target as well. So you don't need to equip that Otherworld battle statistic. She already has it. and it's very effective because it's on her primary skill. In AC, I also rank her in the middle of B tier. Zombies are one of the best niche team-ups in the game. She's probably the best one of the lot. I think that she's generally quite solid and she has a fair reputation. The last character that we're going to discuss is one of the best in PvP, Wolverine, and it could be with this uniform or this uniform. This one carries more iframes and evasion, while this one carries much more power and cancelable skills. Wolverine has super guard break. Under the statistics of the fit skill and under debuff removal, he actually carries super guard break immunity under the statistics of the fit skill. His fit skill has a lot of unique buffs, like increased duration, like debuff duration, and it is a one-shot skill that's unavoidable. It ignores iframes. It's a full iframe with as many hits as you can count. He has increased chain hit. He has 2 cancelable skills. One of them also has invincibility, immortality. He has penetration. He has heal, a ton of it. The only thing I would say is his weakness is that he doesn't have removal of buffs, and he doesn't have debuff removal himself. So he desperately needs someone to help him lead in a team, because otherwise he would be a top choice in timeline battle, but he's kind of drifted away from that top choice, even though in timeline battle I easily think he's S tier still. I think that he's one of the primary counters to Knull, and he's a primary counter to anyone, including Adam Warlock. Even with something like a Mighty Conquest, he works incredibly well with Mighty Conquest. It's probably his most recommended with Brilliant Conquest, and he can also work with Greed, and he can also work with Rage really, really well. Very versatile in his CTP choice. And in Otherworld Battle, I would actually consider him more in the A tier range. He is debuffed often. When he is debuffed, he can be an asset, especially if he has Greed, but he's often hit or miss. Sometimes he executes his fit skill. Sometimes he gets interrupted. So he's not really the best choice for a debuff tune, but when he's not debuffed, he is easily one of the top choices. In AC, he's definitely S tier. He's very, very good, and he's usually in majority of primary teams combined with Sentry and Colossus, and it's one of the toughest teams in AC. He's very relentless, and he's generally the primary tune to one-shot majority of the opposition. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. The photos are going to be shown here, and I'm going to leave them here for you guys to see. If there was something I missed in the video, like a statistic, I'm sure there was, please be sure to leave a comment. Leave a comment if you have any questions about the characters themselves. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.